If you always have a hard time managing your database, working with various SQL scripts, or if you're using Anti-Framework Core and you have all these various migrations and just things aren't as organized as you would like them to be, then I have a treat for you today, because today we're going to be looking at DbUp, which is a NuGet package that I absolutely love for managing my database schema changes. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. My name is Amichai, and in this channel I talk about software architecture, design patterns, best practices, things that you want to be familiar with if you're a software engineer. This video is part 9 in a series in which we're building a REST API completely from scratch, following best practices, etc. So if you want to stay up to date with the videos as they come out, then make sure to smash the subscribe button. In any case, this video can be watched standalone from the overall series. Now, what we did in the previous video, check it out if you want to know how we did that, is we set up a Postgres database that simply has the following login details, but we aren't working against it yet. The first thing that we want to do is we want to take the two objects that we have, the product and the review, and write a SQL script that will go ahead and initialize the database to create the tables and the columns that we need to store the underlying data. Okay, now if you're following the series and you're like, where did this review class come from and where did this reviews controller come from? Then in between the previous video and this video, then I added the slice for the reviews. For my patrons, then this time we'll have two source code files, one with the code as it was in the beginning of the video, and another one with the code as it will be in the end of this video. Anyway, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and create the script that will update the database for us. So inside the persistence folder, let's create a new folder and let's call this database. And inside the database folder, let's create another folder called scripts. And in here, let's create our first script, which will be 001. And then let's call this simply initialize database. So here we have the script for initializing the database. And now what we're going to do is we're going to use the DbUp NuGet package to automatically run this script. And if we had over here other scripts as well, the migrations, etc., then it'll run them based on the name. That's why we put this 001 in the beginning. It will run them one after the other based on the name, and it'll be performing the database schema changes for us if needed. It'll also go ahead and handle for us logging, transactions, and much, much more. So let's go ahead and add the NuGet package and see how to do that. So the first thing we want to do is to add to the one review project the package DbUp and then dash, not dot, PostgreSQL. Okay, now that we have this, then let's go to the persistence folder to database, and let's create over here the DB initializer, which will be a static class, which will have a method initialize, which will go ahead and initialize the database or perform the migrations if any are needed. So over here, let's go ahead and say public static void, and let's call this initialize. And for now, let's say that we're getting as an argument the connection string. And in a minute, then we'll see how we're actually going to be initializing it. So just imagine that we're getting over here the correct connection string. So the first thing that we want to do is to ensure the Postgres database really does exist based on the connection string. Then we want to somehow get hold of all the SQL scripts. And also let's say over here that run scripts by order. So let's start with this. Let's say ensure database, and let's say for and the Postgres database, and let's give it the connection string. And this will make sure that the Postgres database exists based on this connection string. Next, what we want to do is to create an upgrader object, which is provided from the DbUp NuGet package, which will go ahead and do both of these for us. So let's say over here var upgrader, and let's say the following. We want to deploy the changes to the Postgres database with the given connection string. And now we want to somehow get hold of the SQL scripts. The way we're going to do this is by saying the following: with scripts embedded in assembly, and let's give it the currently executing assembly. So let's say get executing assembly, and this will go ahead and locate all the various SQL scripts. But currently it won't work because we aren't embedding any of the SQL scripts in our assembly. To do that, what we want to do is to go back to the one review CS proj, and underneath this, let's create another item group. And over here, let's say that we have an embedded resource where the path is simply persistence, database, and then scripts. And inside here, we want everything that ends with .sql. Okay, so again, this locates all the scripts in this folder embeds them in the assembly, and then it's available for DbUp to fetch them over here. Next, let's go ahead and say over here with transaction, and this will make sure that all the scripts are running inside a single transaction. That way, if something fails for some reason, then everything will be rolled back. Also, let's say log to console, and this way all the actions will be logged to the console. And if something fails, or also if it works, then we'll see the details. And lastly, let's go ahead and say build over here, which will build this entire thing, which is of type upgrade engine. Now that we have the upgrader, then we can go ahead and run the scripts by order by saying upgrader.perform upgrade, which will go ahead and perform the actual upgrade. And this returns a result that we can inspect and see if everything happened successfully. So this returns a database upgrade result. What we can do now is say that if the result is not successful, then let's just say that over here we'll throw a new exception. Let's actually throw an invalid operation exception, and let's say simply failed migrating database. Now, real quick before we continue, I want to remind you that if you want to join our amazing Discord community, then you can do it for the price of a cup of coffee. Instead of buying the next cup of coffee, you should invest in my Patreon, and then not only will you join our Discord server, but also you'll get access to the source code of this video and every other video on this channel. Enough self-promotion, now back to the video. Okay, now that we have all of this, which is literally 20 lines of code with comments, then all we need to do is call this initialize method with the correct connection string. So for this, let's go to the program CS, and over here, let's go ahead and call DbInitializer, and let's call the initialize method. And over here, we need to pass the connection string. The connection string is going to come from the configuration, and we're going to give it the path that corresponds to the following path. So we're going to have the database, and inside the database, we'll have the connection strings. And inside this, we're going to have the default connection, which is going to be the actual connection string. So for this, let's go ahead and say the following. Let's say that the path is database, and then colon, and then connection string, and lastly, default connection. Okay, now don't worry, we're going to organize this entire file soon and make it a bit more organized. But for now, just so we have the basic minimum code that we need to make this entire thing work end to end, let's leave it like so. So again, we're fetching the connection string from the configuration, which means that now we can go ahead and set in the app settings the underlying connection string. But because we already have Docker set up, then let's go to the Docker compose file, and over here, let's set the connection string as an environment variable. So this is the path that we're using. So what we want to do is say database, and then the two underlines is converted to a colon. So then we have the connection strings, and then again a colon, and finally default connection. Okay, so this is the name of the environment variable that will later be fetched over here. Now let's give it the actual value. So we have the host being the DB. So this DB is referencing this DB. Then we have the port being 5432. And then we have these details over here. So we have the database being OneReview. We have the username being Postgres. And we have the password being strong password. Okay, now just to make sure that this is working as we expect, let's go to the program CS, and let's for now just log to the console the value of this to see that this works as expected. Okay, so we're off to a good start. So over here, we see that we populated the values correctly, meaning that over here, we're fetching the correct connection string, and we're passing it successfully to the initialize method. Now, all we have left to do is to make sure that we really are performing the upgrade. So let's go ahead and say docker compose down, and then let's say docker compose up -- build. So we can see that the two containers were created successfully, but then we see that we hit some exception when we're trying to connect to the database. And if we look below, we see that the server is only created down here, but we're trying to access it before it even started. So basically what we want to do is we want to make sure that the DB starts successfully, and only then we try running the various scripts. To do this, let's say over here that starting the web app, this depends on the DB, where the condition is that the service is healthy. What this over here does is it makes sure that we pass the following condition specified under health check, where we want to run the shell command pg is ready -u postgres -d one review. Let's take the values here way down. Let's say this is 5 seconds and the timeout over here is also 5 seconds. Let's leave it at 5 retries and let's get rid of this. And now that we have this, let's say docker compose down and then again docker compose up --build and see if this works successfully. So we have the server starting, and only below then we see we have the run one review API starting, and down here we can see that indeed we ran the script 001 initialize database.sql, which means that now this should be correct if we look at the underlying column. So we have over here this corresponding to this as we expect, and this over here corresponding to this. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll organize whatever the heck is going on over here, because very quickly this will get out of control. So we'll see how I like organizing it in projects that are structured this way. After that, we'll add Dapper, then we'll have global error handling and various other really interesting topics. So if you don't want to miss out on that, then make sure to smash the subscribe button, and I'll see you there.